Greetings, my friends. Jimmer Lins here with your Source Filmmaker Tip of the Day. Today is Tip of the Day number 33. As always, thank you for tuning in, for subscribing to my YouTube channel, and for all the great feedback. It is truly appreciated. I have some interesting news today. A gentleman named Russell Brandom contacted me several days ago about an article he was doing for BuzzFeed.com, and the article came out today. You can find it at buzzfeed.com/tech. It's a very interesting article talking about how Source Filmmaker is a game changer in the world of animation, especially for those of us in the what would be called the amateur class, or as I like to put it, the ones who don't have huge stacks of cash sitting about. At any rate, it's an interesting article, definitely worth seeing. But let's move on with today's tip of the day, in which I'm going to show you how you can create your own custom color corrections. And by way of demonstration, I've set up this shot, which, as we can see, we have a heavy coming out, and he does his little taunt, but it's in black and white, and there's a sort of film grain effect over it. And the idea, I just did this really quick, was to sort of show you what you might be able to do with sort of a noir effect. But you can do all kinds of your own custom color corrections. So how do we do this? Well, first, let's just go through the whole process. So I'm going to delete these two effects tracks that I added earlier. And now we can see what it would look like without the color correction, which is, the standard TF2 look and feel. So how do we actually add our own custom color correction? Well, to do this, you're going to need to go into the game engine. And so press F11 to start up the game engine. I'm going to move over here where I'm not seeing I'm not clipping through the heavy that's already there. Now, in order to create custom color effects, you have to open up the console. And in the console, you will type Color Correction UI. That's Color Correction UI. And you will see this come up. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. And there we go. So in the Color Correction UI, let me turn... I can't. Okay. All right, so I'm going to position this so you can actually see the window a little bit better. In the Color Correction UI, you have several options, and the one that you're going to be most interested in is going to be the Enable button here. So you click Enable, and then we're going to click New. And on the New option, you're going to see several operations, and we have a multitude of different kinds of color corrections we can create. For example, if you create one using the Curves tool, this is something that should be familiar to anybody who's worked with any image editing software like Photoshop or GIMP or things like that. We can adjust the color curves and produce some interesting, if not psychedelic, effects. But that's not what we're looking for right now. So I'll go ahead and close this and hit the delete button. If I create another new one, I can create one using a Levels tool, which again should be familiar to anybody who has used any image editing software, and I can adjust the input and output levels to create interesting effects. Again, these are all things that, as I always say, I encourage experimentation with. The one that we're going to be most interested in, though, is the Selected HSV tool. HSV stands for Hue, Saturation, and Value, and is a way of representing color. I am not going to go into all of the details behind the theory because there are college courses that go on about color theory for months. But in a nutshell, and this is an extremely simplified explanation, hue, saturation, and value means the hue is the color, the saturation is how intense the color is, and value is how bright the color is. That's actually not quite correct, but I don't want to get into the whys and wherefores. But for this particular demonstration, what I want to show you is, in order to create the effect that I did, I'm going to say saturation. I'm just going to drop it to 0, and I'm going to say select all. And that applies it to all of the image. And as you can see, that creates this black and white effect. And once I am done with my with creating that, or once you're done with creating the effect that you want and the color correction you want, you're going to want to hit the Save button. And it's not the first one you see, it's the second one with the dots, because you have to save it in a specific location. You're not going to save it in the default location. You're going to need to save it in another one, and I'm going to go up here a few things, and I will show you. You're going to want to go to Source Filmmaker in your Steam folder. You're going to want to go to Steam Apps, Common, Source Filmmaker, and go to Game, TF_movies, Materials, Correction, and save it there. Now, the file you will be saving out of your game engine is going to have a VCC extension that stands for Valve Color Correction. However, under the hood, it is actually going to save a raw file, RAW. I'm not going to save it right here because first off, I've already done one, and second, it takes several seconds, a good 10, 20 seconds sometimes to save the file. But it's going to save the VCC file, and it's going to save the raw file in that folder. And now one of the things that you're going to need to do once you're done with that, and once you've saved that file, is uncheck enable and then close this. The reason I say uncheck enable is because you will find that in the game engine in Source Filmmaker, you will see effects and you can accidentally double apply effects and so forth. What I've found is that it tends to be kind of a buggy system. So you're going to run into weird problems with it from time to time, but that's, it's what we get, right? Okay. So now I have created my custom color effect and I want to add it to my shot. In order to do that, I'm going to find the overlay track and the effects track. I'm going to say add clip to track, and I'm going to say, as you might guess, color correction effect. And then I'm going to expand the track here so it covers more than just a couple of seconds. I'm going to drag this up here into the element viewer, or I could right click it and say show an element viewer. And this will show me a number of options here. And the one I'm looking for is file name. And there's a little ellipsis button there. I'll hit that. And again, I'm going to navigate to where I saved that file, which is game, tf_movies, materials, correction. And notice that I've got these raw files. bw.raw is the one I want. It will be whatever file name you created earlier. So open that. And voila, now I have my color correction effect. But it looks a little clean. I mean, if I wanted this to look like an older movie or something like that, what I might want to do is have some film grain, which is easy enough to do. So to add a grain effect, I'm going to right click and say add clip to track. And in this time, I'm going to say material overlay effect. And again, I'm going to expand this to cover a little bit more range. I'm going to right click, show an element viewer, and this time I'm going to say material, and instead of getting a file browser, I'm going to get the model browser, and the one I'm looking for is here. I typed grain down in here and it filtered it down. I want film grain, pgrain1, pgrain.vmt. And yeesh, that's really grainy. Now, in order to adjust how intense the grain effect is, you can click here where it says overlay color, and you select that, and you can just drag the alpha slider all the way to the left, which means none of the effect is applied, or all the way to the right, which means all of it is applied. So depending on what you want, you can apply a slightly different amount. So let's say I want to have a moderate amount of film grain. Now when I play this, the heavy comes out, does his taunt, and it's all in black and white. You can have some fun with this by playing around with things like cameras, tone map scales, lighting, and a whole bunch of other things. But between all of these things, you now have another tool, if you weren't aware of this, for creating your own custom color effects. Again, in the color correction UI, I recommend experimenting and just seeing what you can create. I mean, you can create some really outrageous color corrections. And one of the nicest things about the color correction UI, or the color correction things that you create, is that they're actually not very expensive. So theoretically, they will add very little to your rendering time, which is a positive thing for those of us who have complicated movies that take a long time to render because you've got all your settings turned up. So for what it's worth, that is your tip of the day, number 33, how to create your own custom color correction effects in Source Filmmaker. I hope this was useful, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I am Jimmer Lins, and I will be back with another tip of the day on Monday. I look forward to it. I hope you are as well. I hope you have a great weekend, and enjoy using Source Filmmaker.